I just posted my last video to YouTube, the first video I've posted on YouTube. I've been mainly posting my videos on Instagram, but I think given the length and kind of what I want to do with these videos, maybe YouTube's a better place. Instagram's cool because you can make those series, and I like that, so I can kind of divide everything up. I haven't figured out all the functions of YouTube as a content creator quite yet, but regardless, maybe I can actually find something of an audience on YouTube for the people that want to have their experience with books, with various forms of literature, to be in various genres of literary fiction or nonfiction, to be enhanced, especially fantasy fiction, such as I talked about in the last video. In the last video, I took a look at the glossary and singled down on the Trollocs and the Trolloc Wars. The Trollocs being a term that we use to refer to these creatures in the world. They're not good, they're very cruel, they do have a sense of humor, but they are half man, half beast, a distorted, just an awful transmogrification of human and bestial nature. It's they're ugly things. I'd referenced how in the beginning of the first book, Rand and what he thought was his true father at the time, Tam, they come in confrontation, they come into conflict with Trollocs, and this was a shocking realization on Rand's part, that these things aren't just ghouls and little bedside stories that old grandma or mom or dad, or mom or pa would tell you while they're trying to get you to go to sleep, or maybe there's some moral to them or whatever. This is actually this is real, right? The general purpose of these videos is just to synthesize all these fields of meaning, these fields of learning, creative writing, fantasy fiction, Wheel of Time, or whatever other book series I'd use as examples to kind of establish my meaning on top of as I discuss all these topics. I want to be able to synthesize it all together so that I can have a more orotund understanding and outlook on loads of matters: literary fantasy fiction, epic fantasy fiction, viewpoint and characters, creative writing, the process, the way to think as a writer that actually would make sense to other professional writers in the field. These are things that I would like to think about. And in these videos, I could reference guitar playing off the cuff. I could reference anything to help me explain my meaning, as I do play guitar, and I have developed a degree of expertise in that area, I suppose. And so I've found that one way to enhance the experience of books like The Wheel of Time, or even books like Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha, which I have somewhere around here, because the version I have, it too has a glossary of terms at the very beginning instead of at the end, Sanskrit and Pali terms that Hesse uses throughout the book, such as Brahman and Atman, which have complicated meanings and can only be interpreted, called to be interpreted in certain contexts to be fully illuminated in their grounds, in reality. So I had looked at Trolloc and the Trolloc Wars, and of course that led me to make all these different connections to the systems of dating, to the methods that the fictional characters in this book use to date things and to keep events in a chronological order. We have AD or CE, BC, BCE, or what have you. In this, there's other ways to tell time, right? To date it all. Like AB was what was referred to in the Trolloc Wars entry, and that stands for after the breaking of the world. AB, after breaking, right? And the breaking of the world is a very peculiar event in the history of the Wheel of Time universe, and I still haven't figured out what the name of the whole world is that divides all the continents. But regardless, so we had referred to that dating system after the breaking, and that led us to talk about the War of the Shadow as we looked at the Trollocs entry. That led us to talk about the Dark One, and we mentioned Meadsrael, Dreadlords, the Great Blight. So there's all these references to proper nouns that refer to either places in the world or to events in the past in the history of the world, or which refer to other types of creatures that are important to understand, that are important to know something of for the enhancement and enjoyment of the reading experience, which again, I want to stress that I guess ultimately that's what this is about, is putting, the good at the center of it all to try to enhance the reading experience that we have of such potentially immersive literature, such as The Lord of Chaos. Brandon Sanderson talks about this idea of the box, and I've referenced this. I referenced it in the other video, and that kind of represents the way you're telling your story, with what viewpoint, with what tense, what's the quality and the tenor of the voice, right? Why did I mention the box, right? Why did I mention the box? I mentioned the box for some reason. I was talking about how this is all about, the goodness of enhancing the reading experience. And in his discussion of the box, Brandon Sanderson mentioned something that was going to be relevant to a point I was going to make, but I have seemed to have forgotten. But regardless, I remember now. I had referenced this as literary fiction. And see, this is organic, this is authentic stuff, so I'm thinking on the cuff. And he talks about how in literary fiction, the argument is that the box, the way you tell the story, or the way you show the story, is usually more beautiful. The style of the sentences and the diction chosen and the order of the words and the sound is going to be of a higher quality than what you would have in non-literary fiction, or that the devices or techniques you use are just really advanced forms of these techniques, like you're using a really advanced form of perspective or a point of view or storytelling technique or narrative technique or whatever it might be. And that's fine and everything, but I think that we could also carry some subjective connotation along with us when we speak of what's literary and what's not. To me, the Wheel of Time stands as something literary, and because I do find it so beautiful, exactly for that reason, and that's my opinion. But I was using the glossary to dig into some of these main ideas, these main terms, which can be the subject of from an uncountable variations of predicates, right? We could make an uncountable amount of predications on any of these terms, such as the Trolloc Wars or the Trollocs. Some of the predications in the entry in the glossary for Trolloc, the first one, as I've already read, was creatures of the Dark One created during the War of the Shadow. So the predication would be Trollocs are, so Trollocs being the subject, and then are creatures of the Dark One created during the War of the Shadow. It's like a compound predicate, because we have this type of phrase here that we're connecting to creatures of the Dark One. So we have Trollocs are creatures of the Dark One. That would be a solid independent clause right there and a solid predication. But then we have comma created during the War of the Shadow, which is passive voice, because we don't know the agent behind the creating. But they were created during the War of Shadow. That gives us more information about Trollocs, and it works well in that sentence. And it suggests that the Dark One might have something to do with the creation of it, since they're creatures of the Dark One created during the War of the Shadow. So, it does seem that the Dark One had a hand in their creation, actually, when you look more closely at that sentence. So that would be the predicate of it, but there's countless other predicates you could make. You could put any any one of the, you could put those words in a different order if you wanted. You could put the created during the dark one. They are creatures of the shadow, so you could change the order of the clauses or the phrases within the sentence itself. You could even change some of the prepositions if you wanted. Yes, you could say created, you could say creatures of the dark one created not during the War of the Shadow, but created while the War of the Shadow waged, right? You could say they were created while the War of the Shadow waged on, right? So now you're using while, but we're adding a little bit more to it. But anyway, my point is that you could predicate countless things of any of these terms as you put them in subject, and there's a lot of meaning behind them, because in the story itself, these words are used very often by characters in conversation with one another, as well as characters' inner monologue that we see from their viewpoint, given that that this part of the chapter, or this whole chapter, is told from their viewpoint. We see them using these terms to themselves, and they have a lot of meaning because they carry connotation depending on the point of view. The extra meaning that the Trolloc Wars has for Moiraine Sedai, or Moiraine Sedai, which, let's make sure I'm pronouncing her words or her name correctly, because she's a very important character and one of my favorites by far. Her name is Moiraine Damodred. She's an Aes Sedai of the Blue Aja. The Blue Aja focus on causes and justice, compared, for example, to the White Aja that focus on healing. There's 7 Ajas, which are different societies of Aes Sedai that are fortressed, are headquartered in the Tar Valon Tower, the White Tower at the center of Tar Valon, like a sort of little island city in a river, which some of the story has taken place at. We've been there with the characters to Tar Valon, to the White Tower, in the very quarters of the Amilloran seat itself. Which, let's make sure I'm pronounced. This is one of the great things about the glossary, is that it can enhance your understanding of a story like this. Make sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. Amyrlin seat. The Amyrlin seat is, and that's the leader of the Aes Sedai, right? Elected for life by the Hall of the Tower, which consists of 3 representatives called sitters, as in a sitter for the green from each Aja. So apparently the Amyrlin seat, whoever that is, for a while, Siuchan, I'm probably mispronouncing her name too, she's represented, or she's elected by the Hall of the Tower, which consists of 3 representatives from each Aja, Aja, which again is those 7 societies of the Aes Sedai, these women that have power and have been trained and gone through the requisite education of the one power. They elect the Aja. So there'll be 21 of them if it's 3 from 7 of the societies. And so that was just like a perfect example of how using the glossary can enhance the reading experience that you have of such immersive literature like this, because it challenges your understanding of a fictional world like this. See how all the pieces of the puzzle fit together, and how one term is immediately connected to another in meaning. There's a close relationship between the term warder, for example, and Aes Sedai. I think there's only one Aja which don't take warders, and that would be the red Aja. Let me make sure I'm pronouncing Aja correctly, because these pronunciations are killer, man. Yeah, Aja, right? It's the red Aja. They've devoted their lives as Aes Sedai to to the discovery and gentling and the prevention, for the discovery and the gentling of men that turn out to be able to channel the one power, which is connected to the breaking of the world, and is connected to the war of shadow, and has been connected, of course, was connected to the Forsaken. It's connected to Randall Thor, which is connected to the whole universe of the Wheel of Time, which we read about in all these books. And it's also just the joy of letting the mind spontaneously come up with these connections that drives me to release more content like this, and to hopefully make a voice for myself amongst anyone that is listening. Of course, I do want to say I haven't read the whole series yet, but I'm trying to enhance my understanding of it all. And so I probably should end the video there, because I've lost track of some of what I initially had been talking about. But that's also just the nature of discussion like this, is that it can be rambunctious and wild and free. It's very spirited. Thanks for listening.